Now, you might have missed it at the weekend, but the annual GAA Congress happened virtually. I'm delighted to say Michael Verney of the Irish Independent is with us to chat through some of the stuff that happened. Michael, I wonder, was what happened at the Congress this week less important than what didn't happen in some ways? A lot of big decisions were kicked down the road until we might be able to have a Congress in person.
Yeah, I'd agree with you to an extent. I think there was still a massive decision made, and that was the cynicism rule, particularly in hurling, a rule change that I definitely think should have been kicked down the road until we had an in-person special Congress later on in the year, because they're basically rule changes that are fundamentally going to change, particularly how hurling is going to be played. Now, I'm not saying for a minute that cynicism doesn't exist in hurling. It's quite obvious that it does, but they've really pushed the nuclear button here with the changes that they've made. Personally, I think increasing the area with which a penalty could be given out to the 21 and within that semicircle area, I would have loved to experiment to see would that be enough to curb cynicism, rather than introducing a sin bin, which will could fundamentally change an awful lot of games that are played to the extent that a player is going to be in the sin bin for 10 minutes if he is adjudged to have committed a cynical foul to deny a goal scoring opportunity. That brings in all sorts of other possibilities into the game, in my opinion. The likelihood of forwards trying to buy a tackle like that or encourage a tackle like that will probably increase. I just think it fundamentally changes the game. I think we've gone too far to that side. I know it's only on an experimental basis for 1 year, but I would have just loved to see if they just trialed the new penalty rules just to see whether this would have helped to curb cynicism. I personally think that this should have been kicked down the road as well. I think it's a massive change. Particularly, it could come in this year's championship, on the back of, maybe potentially 2 to 3 games that players will have had to play with these new rules. And whatever about players, referees will have had very little time as well to get used to these new rules. It also places massive pressure on their shoulders, even more pressure. I suppose it's very subjective. What is a cynical foul? What is a goal scoring opportunity? So I think we've created a lot of problems for ourselves here. But I think we've gone a bit too far. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have changed, that a rule change wasn't needed. I just think by trialing the penalty and seeing whether those changes would have been enough, I think that would have been enough for 2021. And then if that didn't work, no problem. Open to something else, open to another change. But I just think we've gone a bit too far the other way.
So for anybody who missed it, what exactly is the new rule?
So if a cynical foul denies a goal scoring opportunity anywhere inside the 21-yard line or inside the semicircle D, basically a penalty will be awarded, a one-on-one penalty, which is obviously a high percentage chance of that being scored. And the offending player will be sent to the sin bin for 10 minutes. And there are people want the same rules for hurling and football, which is fair enough. But if you look at it, they are different. They are fundamentally different games. If somebody goes to the sin bin in football, you can put a lot more players behind the ball and potentially not concede that much or pack the defence. In hurling, you can score from 100 yards, so you can put as many players as you want back there. You mightn't concede a goal, but you could easily concede 10 points. A game could be over by the time a player comes out of the sin bin for what could be a subjective foul. It could be a foul. I'm sure there will be goal scoring opportunities not blown, and there will be ones that weren't. They won't be blown as well. So it's going to be interesting. It does place an awful lot more pressure on the referee, even more pressure, and God knows they have enough pressure on their shoulders already.
It feels that, Michael, this is a conversation that's really got going in the last 2 seasons, and sometimes it feels that GAA can be a slow-moving thing, and the Congress is the slowest-moving part of the slow-moving thing. It seems like a really radical thing to have happened so quickly at GAA Congress.
Yeah, well, a similar motion was universally defeated at the 2020 Congress, and there's been a massive about turn. Were there that many instances of cynical fouling and hurling in 2021 and 2020? Yeah, there was a fair few. I wouldn't say there was that many more than normal, but it's been a massive change, and obviously 60% was needed for the majority. It's great to overline with 61. I would just personally, when you're fundamentally changing the rules, as much as you're going to be changing them, particularly in hurling, I just think it would have been better to leave it to a special Congress. They had a 55-minute debate on it. That's how important this topic obviously was and is. So, would they have had a 55-minute debate on championship structures? They potentially would have, and they would have if they would have kicked it down the road until the special Congress. So I just think we've potentially tinkered a bit too much. I'm not saying hurling is perfect. I love hurling, but I'm not saying it's perfect. And you should always be open to improvements being made to your game. But I just think we've gone potentially a bit too far. Maybe after the experiment year, they'll realise maybe the sin bin wasn't a great idea and the penalty is enough of a deterrent. I would have went with the incremental changes rather than making a sudden and very, very kind of a seismic change.
Why did it pass this time, Michael? Was there more gravitas behind the person who pitched it?
I wouldn't say. Well, it's coming from the Standing Rules Committee again. I suppose it's just something that seemed to have built up an awful lot of momentum throughout the year. We wouldn't really have been talking too much about cynicism in hurling up until probably 2 or 3 years ago. But I don't think there was a Sean Cavan or Conor McManus moment or anything like that where everybody just kind of went, oh, we need this to come in. But it just seems to have gathered huge momentum. You've also found as well, I'm not saying that this was the case, but you'd often find that GAA presidents have certain things that they want to try and get through during their reign, and maybe it's no coincidence as well that this was John Horan's this was one of his last acts as president, and maybe it's something that he felt very strongly about and was talking to an awful lot of people to try and get it over the line. But I just think it warranted an awful lot more debate, and I think it warranted an awful lot more thought than maybe we've given it.
You mentioned John Horan there. His response to Michael Dignan's comments on funding was very interesting. So for people who've missed this, Michael Dignan, who obviously is the Offaly chairman, said that one of the biggest challenges they have is financial, that the ability to survive, never mind compete again at the highest level, is based on urgent equalisation of funding. I just think this whole discussion has been, I won't say swept under the carpet, but I think times have changed. Dublin have received support when they needed it. Other counties need it now. And John Horan took issue with that, Michael. He said, to refer to it as swept under the carpet, he said he found that a bit insulting. Was there a little bit of tension there? Did Dignan's comments not go down well?
Dignan's comment, he didn't actually say it was kind of swept under the carpet. He said it kind of, for want of a better word, it may have been swept under the carpet. And obviously, in the job that we're in, those kind of words are taken as verbatim. He said it was swept under the carpet. He didn't necessarily say that, and it's fair enough for John Horan to take kind of umbrage with that. I wouldn't say it's been swept under the carpet, but as you said, Dublin got funding when they needed it. They're self-sufficient now. It's a really sustainable organisation there now, whereas a lot of the smaller counties, shall we say, don't have the same opportunities available to them, be it funding, sponsorship that they can get from other counties. So I think Michael makes a fair point, and I think he probably speaks for a good few of the smaller counties. But saying that, we did a survey in Independent a couple of weeks ago, and it was overwhelming what the feedback we got back from a county board chairman. I think it was 75% county board chairman didn't want the Dubs defunded. So, and Michael was one of the few kind of outliers who was basically speaking against that. So it's a fair point, but it's not something. I suppose John Horan, obviously he's a Dublin man. It's probably not something that maybe he was the right president maybe to tackle this issue. But I definitely do think it's on the agenda to be tackled in the very near future. And with John Connellan's motion, which I'd imagine would receive quite a bit of support from clubs around the country and some counties. I'd imagine that would be on the clár for the 2022 Congress.
Do you give it any chance of passing, though? Because as you mentioned, your own survey in the Irish Independent is basically the exact same metric that he will be using to determine whether or not his thing will pass next year. And you've got evidence to suggest that if the vote took place at the weekend, it would have gotten heavily defeated.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. No more than the hurling cynicism rule. Like if you'd polled county board chairman, 12 to 15 months ago, it would have been universally against it. And it changed quite quickly and flip-flopped in a year. So it's going to take an awful lot of work behind the scenes. But I know, like, even in my own club in Borough, that John Connellan's motion will be discussed at one of our executive meetings. And we could look at, and no more than any other club, could look at bringing that to our county convention and getting that brought onto the clár for the Congress. But it seems like there is an awful lot of work just to make that change. It would be a big change, but it seems like there's an awful lot of work going to have to go on behind the scenes for like that. It is a massive change, and it would affect the Dubs, and it would obviously affect everybody else positively because they would have more funds available to them. But it doesn't look like at this moment in time that it would go through. So there's going to have to be an awful lot of work done behind the scenes. But we've seen that can be done. It has been obviously achieved with motions from last weekend that weren't popular the year before. So that could easily change.
That's the thing, Michael, with this, isn't it? That Connellan has given himself a whole year of lobbying and has very high-profile people like Michael Dignan out there amplifying that viewpoint. And all of a sudden, your club says that you mandate your delegates to go to county board, and all of a sudden, if enough clubs do that, county boards will actually have no choice. The county board chairman. So your survey was really interesting. The Dubs chairman was essentially saying, "I can't say anything until county board essentially tells me what to say." So the way that Connellan has gone about this, if you want to make change, you tell everybody what you're going to do a couple of years in advance, and you spend your couple of years agitating for it. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if this did go through. Maybe a better way of phrasing that would, I would be terrified if I am the Dublin County Board at the moment, and if I am Croke Park and I want things to maintain the way they are. So I'm interested to see that there hasn't really been that much of a rearguard action or an alternative plan put forward by the Dubs or Croke Park. Is there one coming, do you think?
Potentially, as I said, as you said, they didn't make any comment to us. As he said about John Connellan, it's probably knowledge and wiseness beyond his years to give himself actually time. It's a knowledge of how the GAA works that you do need to get an awful lot of work done behind the scenes. You need to be talking to people. You need to get this idea fester in people's head. He obviously got a kind of, I'd say there was a lot of support when he initially kind of pitched it. Now it's gone back to clubs. That's the way it works. You'd have clubs talking around the country. Many clubs maybe might get this on the, been talked about at their convention. And that's kind of how you do it. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. So as regards whether the Dubs have some sort of a plan in place, given how well structured they are and well organised they are, I wouldn't be that surprised if they have some sort of an alternative. And I'm sure if their funding is substantially cut, I'm sure they will find ways to deal with that too, because they have obviously maximised the funding that they're getting. So I'm sure they'll be able to. I'm still sure to be able to operate to a very, very high level, even if they're not operating off the same funds that they would normally be used to getting.
They've maximised the funding, and Dublin GAA officials will tell you that they've got the maximum value out of the funding that they've got as well. And it's interesting listening to the new man at the helm now, Larry McCarthy, asked about this question of funding. And he says that you have to acknowledge where the money is going and the value that the GAA is getting out of it, whether the investments we're making, whether we're going to get a good return on them. That was his response to potentially equalising funding. So it seems to me, reading between the lines there, that other county boards will need to step up and prove to the GAA that if they get more money, they will be able to spend it in as effective a manner as the Dubs have been doing for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, we got some of that feedback even from County Board Chairman in our survey. Jim Buldra, who's the Carlow chair and the former Leinster chair, basically said, like, if you give £1 million or €1 million to every other county in Leinster, will they be able to basically maximise it and use it as efficiently as the Dubs have, and he essentially said that he didn't think they would, and that's a fair point too. From the GAA's point of view, you're not going to give money to counties if you think it's going to go down a black hole. So, like, the key to this is we come back to how well structured the Dubs are. As you said, every cent is accounted for, every cent is put in place to maximise, the benefit that they're going to get from it. Whereas, we've probably seen with some other counties, funds that have been given to them. I know that Offaly, and along with a couple of other counties, were given funds, and probably still are receiving funds. I think it was about 100,000 there a couple of years ago, and we're not 100% sure where these funds actually went, and we didn't see necessarily any tangible benefits from them. So that's a fair point too. It's one thing to give out money. You have to be, say club grants all around the country, they give out a certain amount of money to clubs. They have to actually physically see what has happened with the money. So the GAA would want to see this as well, and want to see the tangible benefits. Okay, we've gotten more GDAs in, we have more numbers playing. You need to actually be able to see this. So the GAA aren't just going to throw out money willy-nilly. They're going to throw out money where they think it's going to be really, really wisely spent.
Yeah, and I think, look, everybody can get behind that. Before we let you go, obviously, you've got two briefs. You're a very busy GAA writer, but also you've been covering racing as well for a long period of time. I don't remember a story as big as the Gordon Elliott story, and certainly the way it has taken off, particularly across the water in the UK as well, where there was a very swift reaction. They had it on the back page of the London Times. The BHA came out very quickly, and they have essentially banned Gordon Elliott from having any runners in England. This is a catastrophic moment for racing if racing doesn't handle it properly from this point forward, Michael.
Yeah, yesterday was a very, very dark day, I suppose, when all the details came out of this. Very, as dark a day as you could probably remember in racing's history, and probably yet another kind of blight on racing's integrity and its reputation. It seems to be like we're nearly 12 months on from, the Cheltenham Festival nearly kind of been, branded the carnival of the coronavirus, and all the negative PR that came from that. And then you're moving on to the Charles Burns case with Viking Horde, and now you're moving on to this. The image, I'm sure most people have seen it. It's indefensible. Gordon Elliott said last night to the Racing Post that he would pay for the rest of his life for an indefensible moment of madness. The words he gave to the Racing Post last night, it would have been far wiser to give those very, very honest and forthright words. It would have been far more wise to come out with those on Sunday night, rather than what I would say was an ill-judged statement that he came out with, trying to explain the context around the photo. But there's going to be some fallout from this. Like at the moment, while the IHRB investigation is ongoing, the BHA will not allow him to have runners. I'd be surprised even if the investigation is sorted in the next couple of weeks before Cheltenham, which is unlikely because these things tend to take a bit of time. I'd be surprised if they even let him have runners, even if the IHRB passed down a judgment. Then you're looking at the potential of all his big runners not running at Cheltenham. You're looking at Tiger Roll probably not being able to run in the Aintree Grand National as well. But they have to take a fairly hard stance with it, in the sense that it's a shocking image. And I think the thing with racing is it always comes back to, fundamentally in racing, it's about the care of the animal, and he didn't show any care to the animal there. The only thing I will say to it as well, and he's been absolutely pillarized and vilified by all and sundry. As Michael O'Leary says, everyone does make mistakes. This is a very bad mistake. It's an awful look for racing, and it's an awful look for Gordon Elliott as well. The British authorities have really taken hold of it. It looked like they're going to take a really, really hard line. It's very rare for the BHA to come out with comment, and they've come out with several comments while an investigation is ongoing in Ireland, where the investigation is based. They're almost prejudicing, if you know what I mean, the verdict that will be made. And it's a funny one there. It's not something that I can ever recall happening before while a case is ongoing, but it just shows how strongly they obviously feel about animal welfare, and the whole picture and everything gives a lot more food for animal rights protesters and people naysayers about racing. And God only knows those people have had an awful lot of, fuel thrown onto the fire in the last while with various things that happen, be it doped horses or be it, that shocking image that came out as well. So not a good look for racing, and the timing of the photo coming out 2 weeks before Cheltenham, you almost have a feeling that that wasn't an accident as well.
Michael, we'll leave it there for now, but always great to talk to you. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.